Joint Kella and Deb, or the city of
I believe Deb will be here.
Okay. Additions to the agenda, we have number one under personnel. And with that addition, I would entertain a motion to adopt the agenda.
I'll move.
Motion by Lou, and a second by Bruce. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Both same sign. Motion carries. Item 5, approve the correct minutes from the February 14th, 2013 regular meeting and the February 19th, 2013 work session.
I make a motion to approve, separate or connected?
I think we go together.
Both the last board meeting and weekly
Work
work.
retreat, okay.
And I'll second that.
Okay, motion by Bruce, and second by Cheryl to approve the regular board meeting minutes as well as the minutes from the school board retreat. Any further discussion? All those in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Both same sign. Motion carries. Okay, Daryl here, public comment.
My public comment tonight, I provided a lot of documents, 8 different documents, and I've written out my public comment, so if I don't have time to go over them specifically, they're in writing. But basically, I want to respond to the response to my December 4th public comment that the confession and judgment that was used for the JCI settlement didn't meet the statutory requirements. And on the first page, we provided a copy of the minutes, and school chair Dave Johnson responded by saying that, and I had highlighted in yellow, that as far as the justly due, that I was confusing whether the justly due was for work done or whether it was due in the context of a lawsuit settlement. And in yellow, the response from the school board with the 7 school board members that were involved and were present was that we agreed to pay the $295,000 to settle the lawsuit. And then a second statement, and this is reading the school board minutes, the $295,000 was justly due to settle the lawsuit. And my public comment tonight, and this is the main point, is there's a major problem with that justification. And that's the matter that there was no lawsuit. So to use a justification that you were settling a lawsuit when there was no lawsuit, and the signed contract that was in place, the terms of the contract specifically precluded or prevented there from being a lawsuit while mediation was going on and for 60 days after. So even if a settlement hadn't been reached in mediation, there still could not have been a lawsuit for nearly 2 months. And as to whether, there was any potential for future litigation, that was something that would have been purely speculative, because for the reasons that I'm mentioning in my written statement. There was no way to perceive whether JCI would actually file the lawsuit, especially in regard to the extensive misrepresentations, the false statements, and the false information that JCI used to get the Paynesville School Board to enter into signing the contract. So the only matter that could be legally mediated during the mediation that took place, because as I said, terms of the contract prevented her from either party entering into litigation, was, and again, the only thing that could have been mediated was for the JCI claim for services provided. So, in conclusion, the response that Board Chair David Johnson gave at the December 18th school board meeting essentially provides all the proof that's needed that the statutory requirements weren't met. And I was also going to mention in my written statements that part of the comment is as far as the statement made, we never stated nor agreed that the $295,000 was for work done. And my point is the only thing that could have been mediated, according to the terms of the contract, was actual work done. So by claiming and stating on the record that we never stated nor agreed that the $295,000 was for work done, that really kind of ends any possibility that you could justify that it was justifiably due. So tonight I'm requesting that the Paynesville School Board take actions, and I've got them listed. Number one, that the Paynesville School Board members immediately treat this matter as a major problem which deserves to be treated very seriously. Number two, that the matter be placed on the next school board meeting agenda for discussion and a roll call vote by the school board members present be taken as to whether they believe that the statutory requirements were met. And three, that the school board take action to remedy what's taken place, and specifically what's taken place is that the school has taken $295,000 from school district stakeholders, which are called stakeholders when you're asking for them to vote for a levy for the taxpayers, which the school district wasn't legally entitled to. And I propose a way to remedy this would be for the Paynesville School Board to vote to reduce the 2014 school operating levy by $295,000 as a means of returning the $295,000 to the school district taxpayers. This would return the amount taken from them, which the school board has authority to do this. My final comment is that community trust was acknowledged problem by the 2011 and 2012 school board members, and taking corrective action to remedy what's taken place without the community organizing will be a major opportunity for both the four continuing and three new school board members to start restoring community trust in the Paynesville School Board.
Okay, we will consider your comments.
Okay, can I just make a few quick comments while these documents are?
I think we can read through them and do that. Okay, we're going to move on to financial reports. We've got the January 2013 Treasurer's Report and the monthly balance sheet. Any comments on the Bob, anything out of the ordinary that you pointed out?
No, we had one question by a board member about, we had an accident with the van, and although we paid the bill, it wasn't in the green sheet, so I do need to do some checking on why, and we'll check on that tomorrow.
Hey, I have one thing. I'm looking through this and trying to match it to this. I have a little difficulty myself, but capital expenditures and general fund are in this fund. Not just general fund as it says.
Bob, you probably still-
Yeah, and so that was really the only thing I had. It seemed like they kind of conflicted just a little bit.
So are you're just asking for?
Well, yeah,
more?
this report here
Yep,
talks about these two items, the capital expenditure and the general fund.
right,
Okay, so we're using this to look at our big numbers,
yep.
but in this report, it's just the general fund and the capital expenditures, and just real quickly, the numbers on the bottom don't match if you don't add those two separate categories together. That's just a point of information. We
Okay.
cleared up if they were, like if this, to match these two reports, if this capital expenditures could be a subheading of the general fund.
And I don't know whether our system has the ability to
Gotcha.
automatically do that. We can certainly check on that, and I know that you had a couple other questions. You
Yeah,
can
well, I have
talk with
other
me, and
questions, but that's-
we can discuss that too, but I'll talk with Joan about that also.
Yeah, that was the only thing for me, it was, took me a while to figure out where it was, even though I gotta tell you, I don't know about the rest of you, but I think this report's great.
It's a little more of a detailed one.
Yeah, it tells you at least what's going on, you can see what's happening. I like the percentages, I like the budget to budget, and in one quick summary, you have a really good grasp of what's happening.
And I can check to see if they can automatically do that, or, we can also do it by hand if we need to.
I want to do it by hand, but I guess maybe even if we just put a note on there that to match the two reports, you have to put the two columns together, but if it was a subheading under the other one, it would look a lot more clear and the numbers would actually match.
Okay, anything else? Entertain a motion to approve.
I'll make a motion to approve the financials.
Second.
Motion by Mark and a second by Lou. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. And then we'll move on to auditing and approving the January bills as well as February 2015 bills.
I had the opportunity to go in this afternoon and review the additional January bills and the February bills. One of the things, alluded to that we have purchased a van for 25,000 or something like that. But other than that, all the other bills apparently are good to go. So I make a motion to approve the additional January and February bills.
Did you say we had to purchase it?
We did purchase that.
We needed to, as a used van, I can't remember the mileage on it off the top of my head, but the insurance company told the van that was in the accident, it was not our fault, but they still told the van, so
I
we,
was curious, I was not aware of it.
yep, there was one accident and it told the van, and we need to get another one to make our runs.
What the total then
They gave there was a certain amount that the insurance company said that we could buy it for, but there just wasn't any purposes, we wouldn't have gained anything out of it.
Who got it then?
I don't know that off the top of my head.
What's the price?
I'm assuming the insurance company took it and then sold it to probably a wrecking company for either parts or just metal.
So what was the actual cost of the new van? This, what we wrote the check for, or less insurance reimbursement or something?
Well, yeah, it would have been whatever plus, or less than the insurance.
I think the check was for 25,300.
That's, and that did include also some additional extended warranty pieces on the van. And I can certainly send that to you if the board would like that. send it.
I was kind of curious on that. I don't think there was any options here that I could see.
No, we didn't.
You don't have any extra vans and there was nothing to do.
We would not have had enough vehicles to transport students, so.
Yeah.
Okay, there was a motion by Mark, I don't think it was seconded.
Second.
Okay, second by Lou. Is there anything else, any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. We have nothing on the consent agenda, so we'll move on to business. We have Dawn here to give us some information on the NCA's.
It might be easier for the presentation if you were not cranking your heads,
Go out here.
if that would be okay. What?
This key and the keyboard.
Did I not find it?
Was it for 724, 721, or 729?
I don't remember.
Supposed to shut them off.
All right, Mr. Hewitt had asked me to come in and give you kind of an update on our testing as far as what's available, what we have to do coming up yet, what we've already done this year, and what implications it has for the school district. And as I was putting it together, it's a puzzle because everybody is kind of in that same boat. We're all trying to figure out across the state how to get things done. And do them correctly so that we get through the process. To kind of give you a testing overview, the state of Minnesota requires lots and lots of different tests that we have to give, and I just have them listed here, and I'm going to give you a little bit of an explanation of all of them. I can zoom. There. I can make it a little bit bigger. For the grade level testing, we have to give reading and math tests to all of our 3rd through 8th graders. This year is the first year that they'll all be online. So the improvement to our computer system has been very, very important, and we need to make sure that we're continuing working very closely with Jim and our technology department. Jim has been working fairly hard in getting some of the labs taken care of. These are used as part of the calculations for AYP, which we all know. AYP is that big term. But the other thing is the MMR. The MMR is actually the new measurement, and I'll talk about that in just a little bit. We have a bigger testing window because they realize no school has enough computers so everybody can test at the same time. So we don't have to cram everything in one day. The science content area test is for grades 5, 8, and high school biology students. So a student in high school might be taking it in 9th grade or 11th grade whenever they take their biology. It is also online. It is not used right now in calculation for any of our AYP or MMR. It is more to see that we're meeting the science standards that are set up by the state and the National Science Standards Committee. High school tests, and these are for graduation requirements and for calculating AYP and MMR. The writing test is given in 9th grade. The students get a topic and they need to write about it. They don't know in advance anything about it, and they just write. Some years it's very easy, some years it's a pain in the butt, and we look at it and go, oh my goodness. And they come out after 4 hours or however long they spend taking it, because it's an untimed test, and go, that was really hard. So the 9th graders get that test. 10th graders get the reading test, which is used for calculations for AYP and MMR, as well as graduation. 11th graders get the math test. And the math test is the one that right now is very unique, because it's not required that they pass the math test to graduate, but they have to go through remediation if they do not meet state standards on it. That could be eclipsing and disappearing in 2014 because the legislature had said this is kind of a window that we have, so we're going to wait and see what they do to us on that. Those dates are pretty much set in stone because they're paper pencil tests. We're going to get all of the shipments that come in April 16th and 17th. we will be testing the 9th, 10th, and 11th graders. But since we do not have the entire building out here and all the teachers that would be occupied with it, we are not going to be looking at giving the seniors those days off. They will not be happy, but so it goes. The MCA stands for Minnesota Comprehensive Assessment. We're in the 3rd branch of it. Within that is the grad test. If they meet standards the first time they take the reading, writing, and math test, then they're done. If not, they must pass them the reading and the writing before they can graduate. Math, they have to take it at least 3 times before they will meet local standards for graduation. So it's a pretty high stakes test. So we are really busy, as well as going through all of our materials and trying to get our subject matter done with the testing. Last fall, I gave you kind of a quick overview of the new measurement system, and this is to look at it again. There's 4 categories now. Instead of it just being test performance, we have the 4 categories. Test performance is still going to be very high on the list. That's what we're going to get our AOIP rating on. That's how many of our students are meeting or exceeding standards. That's okay, but part of the process of getting Minnesota to get the waiver from No Child Left Behind, we came up with MMR. So now for the high school, we have all 4 of these categories. We have to close the achievement gap. So all kids need to be learning, not just have a group here. If we've got our special ed students, or we've got our students that are in free and reduced lunch, or we've got our students that speak English as a second language that are not performing, we have to bring those grades up so we close the achievement gap from the top students to the bottom, so we're getting everybody to the same spot. And then growth. Now we can't be happy that students met or achieved the standards. They have to all improve, show that increase in rigor. And then for the high school, it will be graduation rate. And it's a whole rating system that comes through from the state to figure out MMR. And those numbers are interesting if you look at the whole calculation. This process came about because of Minnesota's waiver from No Child Left Behind. Only title schools get an MMR ranking. And the only built school within our district that is a title school is the elementary school. And we were identified with the initial ranking as a focus school. A focus school tells us that the thought is that our scores were not where they should be. It's got a few implications behind it. We have had to write a school improvement plan for the elementary. We're in the focus situation for 3 years unless our scores would go into the reward category, which is like the upper 5% of the entire state. We had huge improvements last year that you'll see in just a little bit, but it didn't take us out of focus, the focus category. It's not necessarily a bad thing, because we are now working on focusing our instruction into database instruction, finding out where we have our gaps and filling them, and making sure students are getting what they need. And the assistance that we get from the state comes about because of our focus rating. The Center for Excellence out of St. Cloud is based with resource, and they're coming and working with us. And it's not like it used to be where you wrote the plan, and then if you didn't meet it, too bad. It's an adaptive plan, so it's always a plan that's in motion. We can always change it. In fact, we had a meeting today because between the 1st of March now and April 1st, we have to have our new revision for the SIP plan that's in. The numbers might not be real clear to read, but what you should look at here are our trend lines. What's happening? All this information, if anybody wants to find it, I put the website there that you can go to. It takes a little bit to maneuver. But in the elementary school, when we're looking at it, the green line is going to be the state average, and that's what we're going to be compared to. Our blue line in any of these is going to be the district average, which takes all of the schools and compares them. You can't get rid of the blue line to get the individual building scores. In reading, we're above state average across the board from 2008 to 2012. So we've done very well, and the specific numbers are there. In the math for the elementary school, we're the gold line. We're again above average. Everybody notices that there's a dip from 2010 to 2011 and goes, what did we do? We didn't do anything. The state gave us a new test. It was harder, and the entire state saw that dip. So our scores are going where they need to be. One of the big numbers that is very important to look at, in 2011, our elementary math score, we had 57% that scored proficiency, met or exceeded standards. That's a fairly low number. Our improvement from 2011 to last year, we went up to 71.7%. We're doing the right things. We're moving in the right direction. Most definitely. We have the similar graphs for the middle school. And we look at the middle school here being the purple line. As compared to green is pretty much at our school average. We're coming back in our reading. Our reading score was right, just slightly below the state average for last year, but we're seeing that trend line going up, and that's what we want to see, so we're on the right path. Again, the dip in 2011 is because of the new test, but we saw a major improvement that came in for the math, and we were above state average for last year. So we're definitely moving in the right direction. Same thing for reading.
Can I ask you a quick question?
Yep.
Here? Before you were talking about a focus school,
Yes.
but I look at what we're doing compared to state average, and we're doing pretty good. So
Yes, we are.
how did we get that rating? Did they do it just on one specific
The
area?
rating went in the 1 year, and it's a very, the whole process, we've argued the point of how you get it. It went on the numbers from 2011 with reading and math as compared to all other elementary schools across the state. They took the lowest 10% were named a priority school. ACGC would be a school that's very close to us, that they are a priority school. So they're the lowest 10% in their MMR rating. You get 25 points for each of the categories. So our actual test scores may look really good, but we had a pretty big achievement gap difference between our students, especially in free and reduced lunch, and our students in special ed, and where our state averages were. So that's what brought us down.
Don, didn't they also go back 1 year?
They used 2010 and 2011, and nobody told us they were going to do that for 2010. We knew about it for 2011, but they kind of changed the rules in the middle.
Mhm.
So, what we're looking at is going, oh darn, they changed the rules, and we're on the upswing. But one of the other things that's very, very frustrating, not that we don't want to improve, but the frustration comes in the fact that we showed such great improvement, but it didn't take us to the uppermost 5% of the state, which is a reward school. So we went, and if you look at scores from last year and you compare us to school districts around the area, we scored higher than our neighbors in almost every category, but we're still a focus school because we didn't make that huge jump. So one of those things that you kind of go, oh, those are the rules. With the high school, we have the yellow line in the reading, far above the state average, which we very much like to see. In the math, we started out in 2008 very low. Nobody's really certain why, because we're kind of trying to track that information. But we're showing great improvement. Again, 2011, you're not going to see the dip here because they're still under the MCA 2. They haven't got the new test yet because they have to work it in as far as kids that have been exposed to it with the new standards. The next one, this one's very tight. It just shows the science scores for each of the schools, each of the school buildings that we have. In the elementary, last year, hugely above the state average, almost 20 points, if I'm reading a little bit more than 25 percentage points there. The middle school, above state average. High school, also above state average. We'd still like to see them go up because science is such an important thing in getting kids ready for that next step with college, with the sciences, and we have new state requirements for chemistry and physics coming in for students that are this year sophomores or younger. They will have to take chemistry or physics in high school. The one that gets kind of a slide all by itself, and we should be very, very proud of our English department is our writing. Paynesville was one of very few schools that scored 100% on the writing test last year. Every one of our 9th grade students that took that test passed. So that is a very, very positive thing, so we don't have to do any remediation there. We don't have to worry about any of those different aspects. OLPA is another term. This year, the state decided that we could give practice tests that would actually show us how they did in math. Once again, last year we could take the math test in grades 3 through 8 3 times and their best score counted. They decided that wasn't quite right. So they changed it and said you can give it 2 times to have data-driven instruction. See where the students are at. And then in the spring, between March and May, we'll give the actual test. We gave the first test in November and used it as a diagnostic. The kids obviously had information that they hadn't been taught yet, but we needed to see where our strengths and weaknesses were. I put that middle column in because it wouldn't give me both of them, but we also took it right before conferences this spring, well, winter still, and explained to the parents what improvement was happening, and we also gave them a benchmark, a list of these are the things that are going to be tested at each grade level, 3rd through 8. And we're using that to have the parents get more involved with their students' education. We also have 2 more months before we're going to have the actual MCA testing that's going to count for it, and we saw a very nice improvement in those 2 practice ones. It gives the students the opportunity to practice on the computer. They can't use a handheld calculator, they have to use the one that's on the test, which is going to be different than the one that many of them have, so we give them the opportunity for that practice, which I think has been very good. We chose to do it twice. There are some schools that across the state that I don't understand are not using it at all. Why wouldn't you have your kids practice? We used it twice to see that we were actually showing growth and learning that was going on. We will be able to set those dates up as variables as we can move up. And the big thing is measuring it out so we don't overload or try to overload the computer labs, as well as making sure that our computer classes are able to get in there. The next one that we have here is a spreadsheet that comes from the state, and it calculates where we should be. Everything in yellow tells us where we should be based on their creation of this spreadsheet to close our achievement gap, that spot that was worth 25%. In each of the areas, it looks, we need to get to a proficiency level of those marks by 2017 to close the achievement gap. So hopefully when we get the results back for the elementary school, because they're our focus school, after they take the test, that our reading scores will be at 86% after the test this spring. And that's all grade levels combined. With the math, 73.5%. Those are projections. If we don't make it, we tweak the SIP plan, which is a school improvement plan. And we go from there. So it's a working document rather than you must do this or else you're going to get ramifications or consequences, which is very different than it was before. Any questions on that information?
I think it looks pretty good, personally.
We're happy with the
Heading
direction
in the
we're
right
going.
direction.
We can get better, but we're very happy with where we're going. The last one that we have here gives you just kind of, this is what's ongoing. And people that say, oh, testing's coming up. Testing's going on all the time. And we have all of these different things that are happening. Because of being a focus school, we were required to write a SIP plan, which is a school improvement plan. And it has these 4 components. It has to be created, implemented, evaluated, and revised. And that's an ongoing process. We just had one of our meetings shortly before I came here, so it was right after school. We're using the optional local purpose assessment, OLPA, in math. They do not have one in reading, and it doesn't sound like they're going to get one next year, and we keep asking for it because it only seems that it should happen for 3 through 8, and we're seeing those results. We know what to focus on, what we can do to help kids. We've gone through extensive alignment of curriculum to make sure that not only are the specific course or discipline area standards being met, but we also have some new standards that are put into effect. That is the ELA, which is English language standards for non-core English classes. So what am I doing in my social studies class to make sure that the kids are learning how to write and read and speak and present and all of those different types of things. So we've been working on that throughout the district. We give the grad testing as often as we can. The kids have to have at least 6 weeks in between taking the test. Right now, we have March 6th coming up as our third round for the math test. And we've got about 24 kids that when they take that, they will have completed their requirements to pass at the local level, even if they don't receive that 50 on the test for passing. So they will receive a diploma. And at this point, we have two seniors that are left to pass the reading. One of them, if he doesn't, and he's very determined, if he doesn't pass, he will be able to have it written into his IEP. So they do have kind of that escape clause, but he's very determined. He's like, I'm going to pass it. You're not going to give me a diploma unless I pass the test. So they're motivated. Learning Point Navigator is an online system that we can give assignments beyond the classroom to students. We're sending out a letter on Thursday at the elementary school that says, here's how you get on it, here's the assignments. If you want to help your child at home, if you want to go through it. We also have it set up that a targeted service program that you'll be hearing about next board meeting, but David said I could tell you about it. We've got some monies coming from the West Central Ed District to do an after-school program for the students that we've identified. We sent out an invitation letter for those elementary students. We've got 38 kids that signed up for an after-school program to go in and work on math. And I think that's extraordinary. That doesn't include our kids that are there for their morning. We've got a morning group that comes in that has about 16 kids. And with our percentages, 1 or 2 kids comes out to be about 4%. And that's huge. If we get 7 or 10 of those 38 kids in each grade level, and that's grades 3 through 8, it's going to hugely improve our scores. So I'm hoping that works really well. High school remediation plans in math, writing and reading. We have different steps, and you looked at that. And then we've got some curriculum adjustments. We now have a semester-long class for math prep. Next year we'll have math and science ACT, which will obviously help for the testing. So we're doing good things. We're moving in the right direction. The kids are taking it much more seriously than they used to. What are you going to do, not graduate me? And we went, yeah. So, with the math remediation, on Wednesday nights I teach a math class for students that don't need it for credit. And they tease me, they go, hey, you going to be at math club tomorrow? It's the last one, you bet. And we will be there. And with that, they don't need the credit for it, so they don't need to take the course for school credit. And we can look at it and put it into a little bit different perspective so that they have that understanding, and hopefully we get a higher percentage that are going to pass. That's a quick overview.
Don, there's no reason, could you send me these slides to me so that we can put them on the internet?
Absolutely.
Yeah, so we'll put them on our website so we have that. The other thing that the public and board should be aware of is that this year we tried, just for volunteers, we did the Explorer test. And I believe that the Explorer test is a national norm test, and it really is a precursor to the ACTs and SATs, and it's really an indicator on where our kids are as far as college readiness. Now, we did do it as a volunteer piece. This year, Lori and I have talked about looking at giving all our 8th graders that test next year so that parents and students know exactly where they are in comparison to really being college ready or not. There's also a piece in there about exploring as far as jobs and what they really like to do, and that's also a good benefit of that particular test. And then there's a plan test that's for the older students, I believe 10th grade, that gives us the same type of information. Right now there is no cost. The state does provide those tests. So as long as they keep providing the tests, Lori and I are talking about really bringing those in and starting to use those in what they provide us as far as information on where our students are.
I got a question for you.
Sure.
You said the state provides those tests.
Yeah.
Are those the tests that are provided by the Department of Defense?
No, that would be the ASVAB.
Yes, I
The
believe so.
ASVAB is another one that
Well, I
we do
thought that's
offer.
what you were talking
Yep,
about.
Yeah.
no, the ASVAB is another one that we do offer, and that's on a volunteer. It's from the ACG company that has the Explorer and the plan. ASVAB does very similar, but it's got that military question to it, so it's another option that we do provide for the students.
So they say if the state decides to charge us, because we looked into that down there at the school board convention.
Yeah, they've been providing the Explore and the Plan test for a number of years. Who knows if they'll continue to do that? But I do believe it's a very good test to give us an indication of where our students are, just not locally, just not statewide, but really where are they in comparison to being college ready to go in. And I think that's important for us. I mean, we're starting to make the gains that we need in our tests for the state, but at the same time, we need to start making sure that our students are ready to enter college when they leave Paynesville and be successful. Any other questions? Otherwise, we'll put that on the website.
Thanks, Doug.
Okay, thanks again, Doug. It was very informative. We'll move on to, we've got an addition under personnel. So, number one under personnel, review and consider approval of retirement of Pam Pfeiffer at the conclusion of the school year. Motion by Deb. And a second by Bruce. Any further discussion?
What happens if we don't approve?
And I think we had talk, I really should put these retirements, I mean, I don't know what you would do on that, they probably should move up to consent, because although it's not contractual, there's nothing that says you have to say, you have to come back to work at Paynesville next year. And I think that we would have a hard time enforcing that if we wanted to go that way. We'd probably be breaking some kind of law someplace. So, never seen it happen.
No, I think this is a good way to, because I know that in the past, the administrators, at the buildings would say something about it, what they actually have accomplished and stuff like that. So it's kind of nice to just to do a refresher of, the accomplishments that they've done in the school system over, I don't know, Pam, how long she actually worked here for us, but
And I'm assuming, and I don't know, I didn't bring those things forward because I know that there is I'm assuming that there's a retirement type of gathering for them where a number of things will be said about the kind of contributions that they gave to the district. I can certainly start providing that here at the board also if you would.
well, I think it would be nice because some of us probably aren't going to be able to get to maybe some of those things, and it's just maybe acknowledgement that, hey, they.
So there's a public thank you.
Yeah, the public thing is well worth.
Like some raise it is tagged down here.
Okay, any further discussion about that? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. All right, time for informational reports. Deb, city report?
I actually called Mr. Hewitt, he brought his, but the reality is I did it for the wrong reasons. I grabbed my seat, they had put the wrong date on the top, and then until I was talking to him, I just looked at the date and said, oh, those must be my old ones. And I started reading through it, and it's like, wait a minute, that is what we talked about at the meeting, they just had put the wrong date on it, so thank you for bringing these. We met on the 15th of February down in the Ramada Plaza in Minneapolis, and like I said, Mr. Hewitt was there also. They had two people, David Heisted and Todd Otis, they had to wait for a while for one of them. And they were discussing pre-K and all-day kindergarten. The benefits, good and bad, or not bad, the good, but different. One was more concerned about the availability of it to everybody, and the other one was the benefits of it, and if they were trackable or not. And then they opened up for discussion. There was quite a bit of, I think the way the governor's looking at addressing that though is just in changing the weighting. But in his suggestion, it would only be for schools that offered it to everybody. So I don't know. See, it's one of those things, they come down here to the meeting and they tell us what we want to hear a lot of times, but it's like the proof's in the pudding, so we'll see where it goes with that. And we had our regular business part of the meeting. Then Deb gave a little, or Deb Griffith did a little pitch for the representatives come to the Capitol, and our area is actually this coming Wednesday. So if anybody wants to come, we would be glad. I think they already have a couple people from Ricori that might.
Yeah, there's, I think it's Kimball and Eden Valley Watkins and New London Spicer. It's a set group of schools. I know that in this room we have one that's going to try to come, so I think that's great. And it'd be nice if we could get 2 or 3. I think I'll also try to send out a reminder to, or just.
Mike's not working, so I'm making him go. No, we don't have kids in here, but we didn't in the school anymore, but it doesn't matter.
This is not about whether you have kids in the school system or not. This is about providing.
Treating everybody fair.
Yes.
Yeah. If you haven't, I'm going to put the pitch in again. If you have not gone on the website and watched the pizza video, please do so. It's the most easiest to understand I've ever seen. It just lays it right out there. There's no question like, what did that mean? And then we had Representative Marquardt of the House E12 Education Finance Committee, and he was talking, it was his, he's serving his 7th term in the House, and he was talking about the ED policy, and I, for some reason, have blanked out on him. It didn't,
We're talking about the school finance one?
the Marquardt. Yes, the school finance one.
I think he did fill us in on the governor's budget to some degree, the possibilities of an example. We're talking about possibly financing all-day kindergarten.
That's where I came in.
And some of the other things, there's some concern that I have with the governor's budget. It seems more like a shuffle between hands versus new additional dollars. They're talking about giving us new additional dollars, but they're also then looking at changing the ratios that we use to determine how much dollars we get in each grade level. And
That's why I blanked out, because they say the same thing every time they do that
Yeah.
shell game. They go, watch the ball, which cup is it under, which cup is it
so,
under, you know? It's
in
like-
one hand, they'd be able to say, yeah, we did provide the district with $50 more each year. But then when they add the ratios in there, I think when we did a quick analysis, for instance, I think we lost like $5,000. Not a lot of money, but still less than what, they're saying they're giving us money, but in the end, we're really losing money,
As
so.
long as I've been on the board, that's the one thing that's been consistent. When they say they're giving you something, look for what they're taking away, because it's coming. It's somewhere in there, but
Even the all-day kindergarten piece has its ramifications, because right now we charge so much, you know, so if they don't give us enough to really cover the complete costs, you know, it's not, we'll wait and see how it shakes out. There's still a lot to be discussed.
so that, and that pretty much covers my C meeting.
Okay. Thanks, Deb. And then Bob.
Yep, just a quick few things. Enrollment continues to remain steady. That's a good thing, because we've always had a dip this time of year in the past. So we're staying pretty steady with that. The eye observation piece that I talked to the board about in the community, there's also an administrative evaluation piece that we get with that. So we're gonna be taking a look at that. That may meet some of the needs without any additional cost for us as we need to develop the new principals evaluation piece. So we're starting to look at that. Just be aware that next week I'm going to ask, or next meeting, I'm going to ask the board to revisit my goals, just to kind of put the stamp of approval on those. I'll resend them out to you, so that you have them. We sent out a survey to our teachers asking about parent-teacher conferences. We're just starting to get some information so that we can develop our calendar and come to the board with recommendations. I'm also going to be sending out a short survey to our parents, asking the similar thing. We're kind of looking at what did you like better, this way we did it this year, which was more evenings, versus last year, which was a day-long one and then one evening. So we want some input from the parents on that, and I'll be sending that out by Friday, I believe, to the parents. Just to gather some input. We're doing it through Google Docs, so it doesn't cost us anything, and automatically just correlates and gives us all the information. So it's really a nice deal. Day at the Capitol, you've already mentioned. I did pull up, from our retreat, we talked about possible school board governance policies. This is one school, so I'm not going to make paper copies of this. It's a lengthy document, but I am going to scan it and send it to you. So you're going to be getting this in the email, just so you can start taking a look at it. That was a point that we discussed at our retreat.
Did you read it?
Have not had a chance, just got it.
But does it come by recommendation that's a pretty good guide?
No,
Just an example.
it's an example, because there aren't, in fairness, there aren't a lot of schools that have necessarily policies for governance. There are some, but not, there's a lot more that don't have anything versus the ones that do have things. So I think it's a starting point. As we start to discuss this, I'll certainly be looking for other best policies or procedures, practices from other schools also. So it's a starting point to start taking a look at it, but I have not had a chance to even, I printed it before the meeting and scanned it so that I could send it all to you, and that's about all I've had a chance to do. Congratulations really go to our food service. They jumped through a number of hoops to get, I think 6 cents a meal, if I'm not mistaken. It'll have an impact, really that's federal government hoops that they had to jump through with the new Hungry Free Kids Act. But they jumped through them all, we got qualified, and I think when I had Joan kind of figured out, we're looking at about probably $5,000 more into food service this year, just because they did that. So really, congratulations go to them. They did a lot of work to get that taken care of. They had camera, and I've been gone quite a bit this week. In fact, all the days and up through Thursday, I'm at a workshop that really deals with school finance. That's the whole purpose of it. I can tell you my head is spinning as I'm walking out of the door. I think I'll learn as much or more after this is all over, and I can sit down and have more time to really digest all the information that they're providing. And I think that is what I have.
Okay. Thanks, Don. Is there anything else from you, Ray?
This last Saturday, I had the opportunity to go to an MSBA officers meeting or seminar or whatever they wanted to put on. So there's a lot of information that I did receive at the meeting. I would like to, at some point in time, sit down with Bob, maybe the next week or so, and go through it, and then determine what I should be bringing back to the board, or the entire board, because there's a lot of great things that they were saying about it. Some had to deal with, the open meeting law and stuff like that. The other one was more for the chair, or not for the chair, but for the treasurer that's in my position, or the officer, and what that's going to help me expand on some of the things that we talked about earlier in January about what should be on some of that information that we're seeing on for bills and student accounts and all that other great stuff. So, but I want to sit down with Bob and go through that with him, with the information that I have, and then at some point in time you're going to hear more about that. But it was a great meeting, and learned a lot. So
They offer it 2 or 3 times during the
every
year.
And as I get that information, I'll certainly send it to board.
But one of my recommendations is probably have them come here and just talk about that one short segment, it was, like I said, it was eye-opening, it was well worth the time, and that they said they would be more than happy to come out. This is, you know, this is who we are. We're the Paynesville School Board Association. We're part of them, so.
Anything else?
I have just a couple of things. On this population number in the school, the number of students, I think that is pretty interesting. Before I got on the board, I was running a whole bunch of numbers where our school was and our loss in numbers. If we could loosen the numbers, it will make things look a lot nicer. And you're doing a really good job. So what's your forecast for 1,100 students by the end of the year?
So I think Dave, when I asked him, just to give me kind of really the kindergarten pieces coming in, the two big pieces that have the biggest impact on us are the kindergartners coming in and our seniors leaving. Because if it's a big class and they move out, then you have difficulties. I think one of the reasons that we saw a gain this year to some degree is also that we had a small class leave. So, so I think you have to look at all those. Dave right now has kind of indicated to me that we're looking at approximately the same number of kids coming in as we're probably losing. So I think at least right now I'm very optimistic that we're stable anyway. And that's, that's the first time we can say that in a number of years. So I tell you the truth, I'd be very happy even to stay stable and stay where we're at for next year. And if we can certainly gain some through having good programming for students, I think that'd be great.
And the next question is, we had the students address this last time. When we were running tight on time, trying to get them to school with everything, they brought up some concerns. So what's the process of what they brought up? I mean, is somebody working on it or coming up with some answers, or do we just kind of meet with them next year and listen to their whole spiel again?
No, I think certainly we will look at those. I just had Donnie, one of our board members, kind of go through our capital projects, the 5-year plan, and prioritize for me on what they would like to see done. Unfortunately, part of the premise for that is that if you had $100,000 to kind of use, what would you use it for? We are going to have some additional dollars, but at the same time, I've mentioned to the board before, I'm very reluctant to be using those dollars for anything other than building our reserve fund up to where it's at, because it's not at a very high stance, and we don't know what's going to happen. We have negotiations coming up with the teachers and all the other groups for this coming year. So I think we just need to be very, I would say, I guess conservative is the word that would bring into my mind. So certainly we will look at those things. The things that don't cost dollars are easier to deal with than the other things. They talked about the spot in the gym, which was great, because I didn't even know we had a dead spot in the gym that had heaved. Because whenever I'm in there, the bleachers are pulled out, and I think it covers a part of that. But then, but then it comes down to, okay, if you're going to fix that, which I'm assuming is not a cheap piece, or replace that floor, which will not be a cheap piece, then something else is not going to take place. So it's really about prioritizing. Certainly we can add the students' desires to those lists, but in the end, my recommendations will deal what we believe in, either through facilities or through the administrative team, or through the, once it gets to the board will have to decide, what are our top priorities in the district? What is best for the complete district, not just one specific thing?
Bruce, I think the other thing is, there's nothing wrong with doing that, but it's kind of like getting your tax return and saying to the kids, well, what do you want to do with it? You can do whatever you want.
Yeah, I didn't pick up the $100,000 until I was talking to one of the students, but I just thought they had interesting comments, and so I wasn't referring to that necessarily as a money spending thing, but gosh, they had some interesting ideas. And
certainly their ideas will be looked at as we get the budget developed. It's always going to be a give or take. We are never going to have every dollar that we need in order to do everything that we want to do, or we would like to do, or we should do. But so it still comes down to priority. We don't have a big reserve, unencumbered reserve fund right now at all. And if anything happens, the sequestration is a real thing right now. We believe it's going to take place. You know, that's a possibility of at least another $25,000 that will cost the district because of loss of some federal funding. So there's just a lot of unanswered questions out there. We don't know, and on top of it all, you know, they'll develop their budget at their own time frame. You know, we're gonna have to develop our budget much sooner than the state tells us what the budget will be. So all of those things play a part in how we develop it, but to say that we should take a look at what the students tell us, I think we should absolutely do that.
Yeah, I think it's responsive, no different than community response, and us as a board trying to engage the public a little bit. Here we engage the students. I thought it was really interesting personally.
And I think the other part of it is that Lori is the overseer of it, so she kind of brings some of this to a head too. She kind of coaxes the students on some of the stuff. So she has documentation, so some of the stuff that probably doesn't cost money, she's talking to her other administrators or other people, trying to see if there's something that they can change, whether it's, you know, sometimes it's the food even, is there something they can do with that, you know, or whatever, you know, so there's similar, some smaller things that I think are gonna, they're always looking for something.
There's some things that they talk about that is already in our budget,
Yeah.
or at least the cart,
Yeah.
for instance, you know, they noticed. I mean, they see that. So some of those things we were looking at doing anyway, fits into what the students would like.
Yeah, it was just a matter of, do we really respond a little bit, or it's kind of a thank you for the kids for coming in and bringing the ideas.
Well, I think as we go through, we'll certainly get costs to some of those things. I'm certainly gonna wanna know what it would take to repair that gym floor. So at least we have all that information available to us before we make our final decisions. And I'm just using that as one example. Yeah, if we need to listen to what the students have to say. There's always a lot of wisdom there.
A lot of times I can't think of one right off the top of my head from this year, but in the past, things with food or things with class offerings and stuff, they'll send them to committees, you know, like staff development or, so I mean, they definitely.
You know, my curiosity is this, if they go through all those processes, do anybody get back to the kids that something really happened? You know what I mean?
The principal does.
Oh, okay.
I would assume because the principals are certainly in discussions on
And usually,
what our budget is.
in the past, just things were a little bit different. In the past, it's the students that come to us and they'll say, last year we talked about, and then they'll tell us the things that, well, you did get the food changed, you did do
Okay.
this, you did. So I think we just got kind of rushed through that meeting because of everything else, but yeah, there is.
That was my question, and when we get an update, when things are addressed, the students brought to us,
Yeah.
that would be interesting to me.
Okay,